Um, it's great to see you all. Happy 2025. I'm hoping that some good things happen this year and that also that we cope well with whatever does happen, no matter how we characterize it. So let's keep things on a positive direction and keep our feet under us. I don't want to talk about resolutions or anything. I just don't want any going backwards. I'm going to go ahead and share some slides here, and I think I put the link in after you all joined, but let me know if that's not the case. Oh, you're mostly there on the slides. Um, so I was partially delayed in getting my slides prepared because I got totally derailed by looking at fire information. And partially that was because I was going to share that for our kind of kickoff here. So I'm going to go ahead and get into that with apologies for the fact that some of my later slides might lack design finesse because I was looking at this stuff. Because last month when we met, I shared this climate mapping for resilience and adaptation website where you could plug in an address and get information about forecasts for 5 areas of climate change impacts like drought, wildfire, for example. And it had some specific statistics that it had about like the average number of days with precipitation or longest period of time without precipitation. And so that's obviously kind of relevant to the incidents that are breaking out in the southern part of the state right now and are actually um, progressing in what is actually a pretty catastrophic fashion. I was not immediately convinced of this, but then just today I was reading some information that this will almost certainly be the most um, impact, the highest cost, but also probably the highest human impact of a specific fire incident, depending on how you classify it. But the Hearst and Palisades fire are fairly likely to connect before they're completely dealt with, and so there's pretty historic elements to it. So um, it was relevant last month in talking about forecasting and resilience and adaptation and preparedness, and then this month we can talk about it. Whoops, I did that again. We had this problem last time. Um, this time we can talk about the actual incidents that are occurring. And so I put 2 links in there. One is to the CAL FIRE website, so we could check out what's going on there and see some information. And then I put another link into the Cello website and the map that I host there on fire location and air quality, which this gave me a reason to pull up that map and make sure the layers were working. And so we'll just take a look at that really quickly. Okay, so if I unshare here, mhm, trying to figure this out. Yes. Okay, and I share my other screen. So this is that Cal Fire site, which has information about current incidents, but also if you look under this image, which is kind of like a dashboard, which we've probably become familiar with. Hello, Cat. And the dashboard is like totaling up some data based on the layers that are being displayed. So the total number of emergency responses, wildfires, acres burned, fatalities, that's not updated. Let me refresh. Well, I just saw the press conference and it's 5. Um, and the number of structures, which is also not updated because I don't think they're making official counts yet. So that's a kind of aggregation of data that obviously we could now use our fancy words and talk about that as a computational process, and that somebody had to select the data values and the sources to aggregate and come up with those headline statistics, right? But there's other things that are happening here using kind of geospatial technology that are pretty critical to the way fires are managed and fire response is coordinated. So, for example, you can change here the base map. So I'm going to change there because it's a little bit easier to see this next layer, which is the recent 5-year history. I don't know if you guys are like me and follow a lot of coverage of this stuff, but one of the things they said right away about this Palisades fire burning west of Los Angeles is that most of that area has not burned in 30 years. So beyond just the 5 years, there's a long period of fuel buildup so that they know when an active fire comes there, it's going to be quite problematic. So this allows them to see kind of a historic perspective on fire activity and also to kind of understand how that might impact the potential for an incident to get worse or to be managed effectively, depending on which way you're looking at it. There's some other things here that you could look at that are not particularly relevant to this incident, like lightning activity. I don't believe there's any lightning involved in the ignition or transmission of these. The one that I was really hoping would be updated was active air assets, and it's not. So I don't know what that would show. But there's also a 3D beta version of their incident map here. And it's quite interesting. First of all, it's updating better than the one that we were just looking at. And it's also possible to see the perimeters that they've drawn at different times in terms of the fire. Whoops, it's not clicking on that layer. As well as the districts they use to kind of organize evacuation notices and evacuation orders. So you can see some of that coordination. I think some of you are familiar with the app Watch Duty, so this is very similar to the map that's coming up on Watch Duty. And if you zoom in, eventually you get layers that are very relevant for fire protection. So they're really just making the structures pop out from the air photos or from a map to help them understand where assets might be lost and where people might be vulnerable to a fire incident. So it's kind of interesting to look at some of the patterns of the perimeters and understand how the terrain and the environmental dynamics, but also maybe how some of the response dynamics shape what does and doesn't burn. Like this right here, this unburned island, I believe is the Getty Villa. And I imagine that they had some resources, private resources, that they had invested in making it more resistant to fire, which would help, but it would also encourage fire response to kind of join on with that and that they could effectively protect that asset. So that's kind of interesting here. I'll flip over to the map that I have put on the Cello website. So I've shared the Cello website. It's just my kind of sandbox for people to learn about geospatial technology and how they can access data about their communities and the world around them. So I put together this map, which uses some different data sources, not all from CAL FIRE or state of California. So it's going to look a little bit different. But for example, I've got a map layer of current wildfires. And if you look at the legend here, one of the things that popped out to me is the yellow highlighted symbols, even though they're small in relation to the size of the fire, those are all new fires in the past 24 hours. So when I talk to my friend Don later, I'm going to be very curious to hear where he's flying around in his plane. His particular job is to basically scout the fires and decide how the tankers and various air assets will attack the fire. He's in a little sporty plane looking at stuff. So I'm interested, are they trying to select some of these new fires that they can put out quickly? Here in San Diego, we had a couple fires ignite overnight where wind was 50 miles an hour, and they put it out really quickly. And I imagine there's a kind of a short window of time where a city fire department could respond and actually get control of a fire like that before it becomes a back away and report. So this whole environment is much more complicated than you get even when you see what they're reporting on the news with the three very active fires around LA. There's actually something like 25 or 30 fires that they're trying to figure out the dynamics of and decide what to do with. Um, okay, I'm going to walk through some more layers, but are there any questions? Something else I came across that's kind of interesting. You can have questions whenever you want, by the way. Oh, there's something in the chat. I wonder if there's Yes, there is the ability to have real-time traffic maps. Obviously, you kind of know that Google Maps shows you a version of that. But there are all of the state highways and particularly the interstates have traffic monitoring along them so that you can get real-time maps. And one of the cool things that that CAL FIRE is taking advantage of, and I am too in this website, is that GIS data layers aren't just Excel spreadsheets put onto a map, although they can be, but those Excel spreadsheets or those data tables can be live linked to sensors or to sources of data so that they're actually a service. And so most of the layers that I have in here are a service, meaning that it's dynamic data. So yes, there's a data layer for car traffic. There's a data layer for just truck traffic. There's also data layers for things like stream flow and things like that. So you can see the dynamic movement of elements in the landscape. Or in this case, this is a constantly updating layer based on satellite imagery detecting heat. And so, it obviously is detecting what's happening in the Palisades fire, particularly detecting where the most active fire is happening. But when you zoom out, you can also see it's detecting, the Hearst fire here, and then lots of other small fires that we saw as symbols on that other map. So you can see that the combination of uh, a satellite mounted sensor that's collecting a particular type of data, and that data having geographic coordinates, just like the pictures we take with our smartphones, any piece of data that gets collected in a way that also captures the location of that data value at the same time is geolocatable, and then that can be kind of projected into this environment and at the and put into that data table, and then people using an automated method or machines using automated method they've been taught by people, or potentially artificial intelligence, if that exists, could be going through these data values and actually kind of directing assets and being responsive so that, there isn't some person trying to read and interpret all this data and turn and decide when a response is ideal. So I thought that was kind of cool. I know there's also streams of data that you can get on map layers that are localized. Like this is from satellites that are circling the Earth, but there's also now unpersoned aerial vehicles, drones, flying around collecting data and feeding that back to create maps at a more local level. So, for example, utility like here in San Diego Gas and Electric has done public safety power shutoffs. That's something that they have the power to do to limit or to protect public safety, but also to limit their liability, right? So it's like, hey, the wind blows and knocks the power lines down, it starts fires and it can get really out of control. So we should just shut the power. And the law says that they have to, if they do that, it better be really serious, which means they better check every bit of line before they turn the power back on. The customers, however, are not happy when their power is turned off. And so they're under a lot of pressure to turn the power back on quickly because they'll get sued if they keep the power off too long and it causes economic damage. And so it's just not feasible for them at this point. And so they just kind of checks the problem spots and then cross their fingers and throw the switch and hope everything's okay. So right now, the whole system of public safety power shutoffs is really just a hope system. And there's some geographers who are developing a program that will facilitate drone inspection and analysis of the system in a way that would actually allow them to meet the intent of the legislation. So it's a case where, like, okay, as in many cases, a law is put in place that we want to protect people, but how to actually implement and enforce the law is something that has to be figured out. Not everything actually, in the end, is implementable. There's some other things that are in this map, like historic fire perimeters. So you can see that, in fact, where Pacific Palisades fires burning is really on a edge of where historic fires have happened. It's a fairly unique starting point for the fires, but once it burns over towards Malibu, which it is, that's a very well burned over type of area. Um, and we can look at the current wind conditions. So I've been checking this. I don't know why a lot of weather stations are currently down. I think it may be because of high winds, but there's usually a lot more arrows. Each one of these arrows is a weather station providing wind data. So it's telling you the speed and direction of the wind, and it's also giving you the temperature at the location and the humidity. So 9% humidity, and that wind is still blowing south across these burn areas like it has been. So very, very dry air continuing to be pushed into the area. And then if you look just a little bit further south, oh, I should turn on those buoy data. You can see that, like, Long Beach is not experiencing those Santa Ana winds right now at all. And San Diego, where I live, we've been having kind of like a little bit of tug of war right here at the coast where the Santa Anas haven't been able to push through the onshore winds. So that's why I think so far we haven't seen fire activity where we're at. So you can kind of see how something that comes up out of the blue, like a wildfire, we can both, like, kind of use all of these geographic tools and data streams to make better predictions and anticipation and plans for when this happens, but also to understand when the incident does break out, how it's going to evolve, what the next steps need to be. The final thing on here that kind of combines it all is the air quality monitors. Let's see if it comes up. So if you put the fires on, you put the wind on, and then you should be able to see the pattern in these air quality monitors that are feeding you real information about air quality. So this is current, or at least fairly updated. It's taking it a minute to redraw. So you see that actually those fires and the wind direction is pushing the smoke down into downtown LA. And so it's due south of that Hearst fire and of what's this one called over here? I forget. Eaton fire. This is another like 10,000, 15,000 acre fire over here. So those are having their smoke pushed down south into the most densely populated areas. So it's going to be a pretty big issue tomorrow. I know they just closed all Los Angeles Unified Schools as of about 10 minutes before we got on the webinar. Okay, well, that is the news today through a geocomputational lens. But I just think this is an interesting example. That's why I included it in the Cello website originally. We have fire seasons every year in California. Now every year is just a whole fire season. So this is going to be incredibly important information, not just for public officials, but kind of for informed citizens who want to be able to make their own decisions and contribute to the conversation about fire preparedness and decide how to use their own resources. Okay.
Because I've been showing my kids, we've been doing all the math stuff for the other project I'm doing, and to show them this tomorrow will be really relevant to them too, in a different form than the other one we were. I mean, it's still the GIS, but it's not the
Yeah,
other site we were on. So they'll like it, the layers.
excellent. And
Yeah.
so both of those links are live from the slide set. When you go to Cella, it doesn't work for me to give you a link right to this map. For whatever reason, it doesn't load. So you have to go to the atlas and find the one that's got this tile, fire location and air quality. Okay, awesome. That's what I'd like to hear, is that kids will see it, see what they think about it. Okay, so back to our program here. Click anywhere except for the image that I linked. Okay, so just kind of checking in. We only have 4 more sessions according to our grant program and our calendar. So I just wanted to keep an eye on that. Whatever we do together, we do it before then. So just remembering that our goal is to think about and then pilot the integration of computer science and geography into the subjects that we're already teaching, to give students experiences of what it's all about, why they might be interested in learning more, and how it's crucial to the way problems are solved and resources are managed. Okay, so 4 more meetings, closing down. And as always, the links in here to our Google folder, which has the slides and things like that and resources we've put together for tonight. Besides the 20-minute detour to talk about fire data, I was going to give some updates from CGA and CJEP. I was planning to leave some time in case anybody wanted to share something that they had been doing or are working on since we last met, or even before that, but you haven't had a chance to share and you're so moved to do so today. We would love to hear about um, things that you've tried with your students and how it's working, or what you've learned. Then we have some accounting to do where I will ask you to help me answer to the California subject matter projects how exactly we are doing what we were funded to do, which is to connect with the computer science standards. So we'll just talk about how we could do that in a hopefully a not too painful way. Since sometimes dealing with standards always ends up feeling a little painful. I, we're going to try and make it not super painful. But also, we talked about last time the STEAM Symposium, which is racing forward at us on February 7th and 8th. And the CCSS conference is coming up a month later. So just a quick chat maybe about our approach to presenting at that conference. And what, just kind of a crowdsourcing of what you think might make for an effective session, given that it's going to be 3 of us speaking, I think, maybe four of us speaking. And then, so we've got some different classroom contexts that we can share, and community kind of context, but also to come up with a coherent takeaway for people that come to the session. What could we actually do that would be meaningful in that time? So you've all been to these conferences and various trainings, so it's hard to make something memorable or meaningful happen in that time, but yet we will try. Okay, so just some quick updates. It always seems like things that happen in the spring feel very, very far away, and then you turn the calendar to the new year and they seem very close. So one of those things that I just wanted you to kind of save the date or consider saving the date for is the California Global Education Forum, which is an annual event that we've been doing through the Global Education Project for the last few years. It evolved from once a year event that was going to be in one place, and then that plan never happened because of COVID. And so then it was a 5-day long online thing. just as a what do we do when we can't get together? And then by the time we could get together again, the idea changed from, one meeting, one place in California to a whole bunch of meetings, a whole bunch of places in California. And so this year on the Saturday morning of the 15th, there's going to be gatherings at the places you see on the screen, as well as an online group. And so I know some of you have done, probably several of you have participated in forums, but some of you have had little or no contact with the Global Education Project. And this is an opportunity to maybe just kind of jump into a conversation and learn a little bit more about global education and CJET. But there's no pressure. There's no expectation from our project that you attend, but I wanted to invite you warmly and encourage you. And if one of those locations is within distance, then it's a chance to, commune with fellow educators and probably get some good food and something like that. But also a lower cost investment is just to join online. And then it's just 3 hours and no particular travel or getting dressed or any of that inconvenience. Okay, so also thank you to Jen, who I don't believe is here. Is Jen? There's Jen. Hi, Jen. Um, we have set a meeting to discuss organizing a professional learning opportunity, a bespoke and customized and locally relevant and exciting professional learning opportunity, hopefully, which puts computer science and geography together in a way that's interesting and relevant. So that's the bar we're trying to clear. And so that's going to be exciting. But I also wanted to remind everybody that I offered up this opportunity with our grant funding that if you thought this would be a good idea in your neck of the woods, this is something that could still be organized. Also, if Humboldt is your neck of the woods, then just know that this is already in discussion. Anything you would add about that, Jen? Or, I mean, we haven't had the conversation yet, but
I was just gonna say, not yet, but more info to come.
okay, exactly. Well, thank you for taking the initiative and getting the conversation set. That is very helpful. So again, just feel free to reach out if that's something, if there's an opportunity we could tag on with another event, or you've got a good relationship with the principal and can get us into a professional learning day at your school. I'm flexible. Also, in terms of future things, I mentioned about doing a schoolyard tree canopy webinar, hard words to say, possibly in April. Nicole reached out to me and said she was interested in organizing, kind of planning out that webinar as a learning opportunity, and then having some implementation stuff that kids would do, conducting inquiry out in their school grounds, looking at shade and trees and the overall environment of their school grounds. So that's going to be put on the calendar. So two things that I wanted to bring that up for. One is people are welcome to be part of that conversation if you're interested. So do let me know. And we haven't scheduled our first get together to just map that out, what our goals would be. So you haven't missed anything. But then also in terms of that April question mark, I just wanted to see if people had any idea about an ideal date or time window to organize a webinar like that. Last time I used kind of Geography Awareness Week and then speaker availability to guide me into the day I picked in November. But we have quite a bit of flexibility, so I was just hoping people could look at their calendars and maybe steer us away from bad dates if there's school breaks or I don't know, testing or something like that that's happening in April. Any ideas on that?
I know a lot of testing happens in April, the state testing, typically. So maybe if we just aimed it towards the afternoon,
Okay.
People usually test morning.
So, and we're still thinking, we could still then do something that was within the school day, you think, to make it possible for students to join in the webinar?
I think so, yeah. I think that's more meaningful.
Yeah, okay. I mean, I think that's what we want to do. So, um, what do people think about that afternoon? I think I looked and spring breaks in California are mostly done by April. Oh,
We
Michelle
have
said
a
first
spring
this week
break
of
in the
April 7th.
beginning of April as well. Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so maybe second half of April is the target. Is there any thought that offering a webinar that late into the spring um, is is that okay timing, or have I gone too far into the school year to expect teachers to have the energy to want to attend an extra webinar or do something extra? What do you think on that?
I think if it's offered as something to do with your students, then teachers jump on things to do with your kids, as long as it's not something they're doing on their own.
Yes, and it would be a hand off some resources and some activities that students could hopefully do right, with very little customization on the teacher's end. Okay. Okay, well then we'll carry on with and let everybody know when we zero in on the specific date and time. And again, we would be interested to have students of all grade levels attend, and it's going to be about kind of a little bit like I just demonstrated how geospatial technology is used to map and respond to fires. But it would be about the specific schoolyard tree canopy study and how um, geospatial technology makes it possible to take that kind of measurement on behalf of students, and then how that information can be leveraged to advocate for change in a different kind of school environment for students all over the state. So that's the gist of it. And we have been told that we are, and this is why I asked the question about the timing. And thank you for the info about the spring breaks, because that's a bad time to pick. Um, so we've been told that we have a couple more months than we thought to spend our grant funds, which basically means that our project extends into the summer, which mostly that's summer. I don't want to bother you unless I have something really good going on. And so I'm interested in planning an ANZA expedition webinar for the summer or fall. So I'm not sure whether it's something based on the conversation we just had. You don't want to organize something and offer it at a time that just doesn't make sense for teachers. If it's like a 2 or 3 hour webinar that happens in the middle of the summer, it's not likely people are going to organize their summer vacation plans around it. So I might hold off and offer it in the fall. But also, if anybody, just like I said with the schoolyard tree canopy, anybody out there is particularly interested in the story of the Anza expedition or the first European colonization experiences in California, that's what that's going to be about, and I would be excited to have a planning partner, co-host, whatever level you want to be involved in that. Okay. All right. So it does seem I must have really maybe Southern California's breaks are earlier, because I really missed that you guys were all April. So glad I asked. Okay, so that's that topic. Now I've left you time to prepare and be ready to share. Anybody want to volunteer? Anything interesting that you want to let your colleagues know about?
I'll share some. I've been doing, like I said, the stuff online with the kids, and what I have on the slides versus the learning curve doing it is definitely very different. Fifth graders, which is hard with a class of 30 of them, trying to get the logins and get them in. And I've tried the Nat Geo and I've tried the different websites with them and what's working and what's not. And so it's been cool. I mean, just us even trying to figure out how to delete something once we had it on there, because it was weird with the Chromebooks because the left click wasn't working, and just little things you take for granted. But it's been a really cool experience. So, and the kids are enjoying it, and they're going to integrate it in their state magazines coming up. So,
Okay, so they've been
yeah.
using that Geo Map Maker to.
Correct.
Excellent. Okay.
Yes, because the other one I was having trouble getting the student accounts with.
I think that's a great strategy because of that exact issue. It's no login, and there are mechanisms to generate output. So if
Yeah.
that's working for you, that's great, and that's a great experience to share.
And kids are young, and oh my gosh, the things they can figure out fast for me versus me, the stuff I thought I was doing fine on. So it's been awesome.
Yeah, and I'm pretty much in the dark as far as the functions and kind of updates involved in Nat Geo Mapmaker, other than knowing that there was an overhaul. So I know in the past it was to get export any kind of map product was essentially a screenshot.
Oh no,
Um,
no, it lets you
and
now. Yeah.
yeah, and so now I know that not only does it allow you to export the maps a little more, it also, I believe, recently now allows you to save layers to go back in and open them in ArcGIS Online if you were so inclined to do that.
Oh, we haven't gotten there yet.
Yeah, but I mean, and the reason you're in Nat Geo Mapmaker is because you're not doing the other thing. So that's
Right.
info you don't necessarily need to follow up on, but I just know that does allow a little more flexibility. So if you wanted to have students maybe experience Nat Geo Mapmaker as a lower frustration entry point, and then be able to take stuff into a finished product or
Yes.
something in a
Especially as I get better at it.
yeah.
Can I still update my slides for our presentation, or
Yes.
are they submitted? Okay, cool.
Yes.
Because I
Are
got
you,
some
do
stuff
you
from
mean
kids
for
today.
the STEAM symposium?
Correct. I
Yeah,
think. Yeah.
so even, and I will email our group separate from this, but I am not, my strategy typically, because they want an uploaded presentation,
Right.
I would upload kind of an outline presentation and not be shy about inserting new slides into said presentation between now and then
Right.
re-uploading the current version, because I don't think very many people look at and download the slides
They,
before.
yeah, not anymore. You don't have to print them out like you used to.
Yeah,
Times they have changed. Yes.
yeah. Dara,
Thank you.
you have your hand up.
I was just going to ask Renee what topics your students are making maps on that program.
Right now they're using it for we're reading Blood on the River. And so the kids are finding historical spots, and then they're mapping them out, and so you can do the date, and then you can get a picture. So we're finding historical like sketches for it and attaching the picture, and then a little description, 2 to 3 sentences about what happened in the book and then what happened actually there is what we're trying to do. And then the lines can connect them by like the order they happen in the book.
So is it a lot like the ArcGIS where you're doing can it do layer? I just haven't explored that. I need something simpler, I feel, for this group of students that I have. I have a different class I did last year, and I'm trying to find something that's a lot more I don't know, a little more basic, but also is computationally it also works.
Yes.
So
and
yeah.
that's what I'm finding with this, because 5th graders can do it. The biggest thing really has been just the
I
Clugio
keep telling
Chromebooks.
myself that is my mantra every day.
Right?
I don't it's not going super well, but I just need to back off a lot of something that's more technical. But so I was going to give that a go and then maybe do the 5th grade topic. So thanks.
Yeah.
So it's
Oh yeah,
blood
I'll
on.
share my documents with you.
Yeah,
I have one that
that'd be
I've created of like kind of my troubleshooting, and then one where I kind of created that is the steps I finally told them to do versus what I saw online, because there was something slightly different. So
Okay.
I can easily do that. Hopefully
Great.
save you
Thank
some heartache along the way, right?
Less heartache would be a good thing at this
Right?
point. Thank you.
You're welcome. Go team.
We're anti-heartache in this group. Um, Okay, so I shared a link that goes to the launch page for Nat Geo Mapmaker, and there are some learning activities or kind of like teacher resources. The other thing that is so kind of Esri has taken control of Nat Geo Mapmaker, so it really is it you know it's got a little bit of a different interface and it doesn't require login, which is the main benefit. But it does have a lot of the same functional power, and it makes some of the things that you might want kids to do in a learning activity a little easier to find, like measurement tools and things like that. I think it's very helpful, by the way, if, I've been encouraging people to be creative and not to worry too much about designing, completely new learning activities, but using or implementing or kind of piloting some things, some resources that you find and some, inside advice about which particular, just like Dara, your question was exactly what prompted me to think this. You said, but which topics specifically are suitable? Like, help me find the sweet spot to get to a good activity to do with my students. And so same thing, there's the collections of geo inquiries that they're gradually switching to work with the map maker instead of ArcGIS Online. And just some of that kind of user review about which ones particularly worked smoothly for students or created real lines of interest and excitement where the students went, aha, I get what's going on here, because just because it's easy to use doesn't mean that it gets them thinking actively. And so that's kind of, the other part of it.
So, and also Tom, my students were there, they were able to create an account actually on the Nat Geo so they can save them using their Google login. So it was easy. Our firewall didn't block it or anything, which was really nice. And they're creating the account and they got it in their little school email and they confirmed, and that way they can keep saving their data.
Oh, okay. I didn't even know that was available.
Yeah.
That's
yeah.
brand new. Yeah, they just did that. So that's the
Yeah.
biggest like game changer ever.
Oh, that's funny because it's like it was the big game changer was it not logging in, but then people are like, also we need it to be just easier to log in, and they solved it. That's excellent. That's very cool. Well, great. That's the kind of information sharing that's helpful. Thank you very much. Anything else, anybody, before we move on for this sharing moment? Questions about what's ahead or
I'll just briefly.
Thomas.
Lara and then Josh.
Okay.
That's just the order I heard you start speaking.
Okay. I was just gonna say I briefly, end of the year project, we have world cultures, it's a semester long class. And so we go through a lot of topics very quickly. So the end of the year or end of the semester project is pick something that you would have liked to have learned more about that either we didn't cover in depth or we just didn't get to cover at all, and create a story map on it. And so we did do the story map. We ran it with about, I don't know, 400 freshmen probably. And I would say it went off with 95% of them, it was fine. It is a pain in the butt to log in. I did manage to teach my other, the three other teachers who had the freshmen to, get their kids loaded up. Luckily, Aries is just pulling a few reports and throwing it in their spreadsheet, so it wasn't too bad. So we were able to bulk add everything in. 100% though, our central firewall blocks emails. So I was the lucky person, since I'm the leader at the district or whatever for this, got all of the undeliverable emails sent to my email. But I mean, that's just kind of a little bit of a pain for me. If a kid forgot, I would have to go in and then change it to a personal email for the kid so they could reset their password. But like I said, 95% of the kids went off without a hitch. They were able to do it. We got some, I requirements where they had to have 5 pictures and 1 map. And then they had to have narrative for each of those. And so we had some kids that, I had everything from like the origins of Christmas they actually had traced their family's migration from Yemen to the United States. I had the Moors. I had some people who did it on, their own family members too. I mean, just wide variety of topics. Kids really liked it. It was some of the work I mean, for some students, it was the only thing I got from them all year. So I take it as a win. I feel like for the kids, they pick it up and we're able to make them out so much quicker than I've ever been able to make one. Um, so that was a success.
Excellent. Well, that's congrats on persevering, because the numbers are daunting when the emails all go to you and there's 400 students with logins. But it sounds like it was worth it in terms of the payout. So that's awesome. Thank you for sharing, Lara. Josh, sorry to cut you off, but ready to hear from you.
Okay. Okay, so one resource I've used in the past, I haven't done it yet this year, so I'm truly trying to.
All right, Josh, I'm not hearing you, but I'm checking that it's not my internet frozen.
Can you hear me?
Now I do. Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
You can hear me now?
Yep.
Okay. Okay, so I shared a link in the chat to a website that I've used in the past called Google Applied Digital Skills. It has tutorial for different Google apps, and there's a couple that I've done that are mapping related, and they use Google My Maps. So it's a tool that's kind of similar to Google Maps, but students are able to create their own pins that for locations and have like other data inside of it. So I did one for make a community my map. I know everybody in here is better with coming up with really meaningful and pertinent topics. So I think people will kind of be able to run with it a little bit that way. And then kind of a more advanced, bigger project that I've done is an area guide. And that one, you actually have the data in Google Sheets, and then you use the Google Sheets to import the location data into the Google My Map. And then there's lots of customizing features to make it look nicer. It's not nearly as advanced as like an ArcGIS, but it is something.
Yeah, I appreciate you sharing that, because the other I mean, just like we were talking about the difference between Nat Geo MapMaker as an entry point and ArcGIS Online. So neither of those are actually something students have seen before, whereas a Google Map is. So giving them the ability to essentially manipulate Google Maps, I think has a little bit of an interest factor for students, because anybody who pulls up Google Maps can actually access the tools to do on my map. So that's really something that they could use on their own immediately, and I like that about it, kind of in terms of the relevance. And I think most of the time I've seen teachers use like a Google mapping exercise. It's at a community scale, which is very cool um, for all grades of students, but particularly younger students who might not kind of recognize a city or a regional scale quite yet or be familiar with it. So the mapping would be meaningful because you could zoom in. And to the places that they walk or the places that they visit on a regular basis. But the fact that you can then do the spreadsheet to import it, I think helps the geocomputational explicitness of it, in terms of the way the spreadsheet kind of requires you to think about variables and the structure of the data in order to produce a map that creates the visual. So I think that's cool too.
And the nice thing about the Applied Digital Skills site is it's all video tutorial based. So students can work through the video tutorials kind of at their own pace, and it's easy for the teachers to get students started on a project.
Just as you talked about it, Josh, there's Jen's comment that the creative community mind map exercise could be kind of mashed up with the controversial place names activity we were talking about previously to illustrate what students find if they use that street names app. And it might be controversial place names. It might be bias in some way or some other element like the researcher from Place Names Lab shared with us. So that's very cool. Thank you for proving Josh's point that you guys are good at creating meaningful learning opportunities. Cool. Well, thank you guys for sharing. This is excellent. Anybody else before we move on? See, I the value of being comfortable with the long pause and then the good information flows. Okay, but we won't just keep doing long pauses. So the thing that every once in a while I do some mail inbox archaeology to try and figure out what I've totally missed and forgotten about or not responded to. And something I found in there was a request from the subject matter projects to just provide, there is a meeting happening in March for the wider grant. And I think so this is in preparation for that and for some of the discussions they expect to have happen there. But they asked all of us project leaders to provide some kind of response to how our activities address or implement or connect to the computer science standards. So I wanted to make sure to be responsive to that because they're nice enough to fund our project and I want to help them get what they need. But also given the kind of open-ended nature of the way our project's working, I can only provide a limited answer, right? So I can talk about some of the resources that I've been creating and provide a partial answer about how the story maps for instructional purpose, how some of the materials I've developed along with our California Atlas, how they connect to computer science standards. But that would leave out the majority of what's happening, which is things that you all are deciding fit into your instruction. So these are slides that have been rolling around in the tail end of our slide decks for a long time. I presented them probably like one of the first times we ever met about the computer science standards. And so I'm just gonna kind of use them as a introduction here because what I said back then, which is, oh, don't forget we're funded to do this, which is the integration of computer science instruction into other subjects. So that's the common theme across all the different grants and all the ways that the different subject matter projects are working on this. And we talked about the fact that we kind of just thinking about grain size, right? I mentioned that sometimes the standard level feels a little like an over-examination of instruction to the point that it's not recognizable as human communication and the way people think about things. So sometimes the big picture of what the computer science standards are about is easier to connect with. For example, the statement about equity, that's not just about making sure all students from all types of backgrounds have access to computer science classes, but also kind of that we take the time to articulate through inclusive instruction what this has to do with them and why they would want to develop the skills and knowledge that would allow them to leverage geocomputation for their own personal career or educational benefits, right? So that's kind of a common thread that I think if we are all doing something that's piloting the integration of computer science and geography, I think we can all kind of say we're connecting to this. I think hopefully you feel that's true. And then if we kind of drill down a little bit into the standards, they break them down into core practices concepts and subconcepts. And then in addition to standards that fall under those core concepts and concepts, they do lay out some interdisciplinary connections in there. So that's something, you know, that might be helpful in terms of the kind of standard or generic understanding of how, or some other people's understanding, to be honest, about how different subjects in the curriculum can relate and connect to computer science. I'd also say it's fine for us to have our own ideas on that last one, and to not feel too restricted. The core practices, we've talked about equity a little bit, but equity, collaboration, problem solving, critical thinking, creativity, in two different ways, but then also communication. For the most part, these are core practices that you are encouraging students to utilize in learning in all subjects, right? So in this way, I feel that one takeaway from this piece of information is that computer science is a lot like other subject areas in terms of the general types of skills and practices that are involved. Some of the words there about creating computational artifacts and testing and refining computational artifacts. If you just switch out computational artifacts um, and think of something else, right? Like communicative or argumentative text, right? That's an artifact that we ask students to not only create, but then to test and refine through an editing process to get better at writing a persuasive piece of writing or an explanatory piece of writing, right? So these things I think are pretty familiar and easy to connect with again. Now it starts to get a little bit more about if we look at the concepts and the core concepts, it seems that the terminology falls a little more specifically into things about computers. Yes, we agree. Okay. I previously, when we talked about this before, the reason these ones are shaded green is because I thought these are areas that we might touch on in some of the projects that I imagine sharing as we were kicking off this year-long adventure. But that may or may not prove true, or you might think differently about it now. So, you know, things about like understanding, for example, we were just talking about ArcGIS, which is software, mapping software that converts data with geographic information into a visual representation of data, a map, right? And that depends on not only the computers that we're going to use to run the software and view the maps like we're on today for our Zoom call, but also the hardware that's out there to collect the data, the sensors, the satellites, the internet that feeds the data into data storage centers where we can access it and feed it into our devices and our maps, right? We're also talking about things like network communication and organization. I was actually already just talking about that, about the data talking to other data and being available to us. How does that happen? What does it require in terms of storage? This area here under data and analysis, I think is our most, and in terms of integrating into a lot of subjects, is probably the most clear alignment around collection, visualization, and transformation of data. Might be into maps, might be into graphs, might be into stories and arguments, but also putting that data to play in some kind of model or some kind of problem-solving framework wherein you're trying to do something besides just have a model and make an inference. Okay, so I don't want to go into too much, you know, at this generic level. You guys all know what these words mean, and you can start to think based on what you know about those words. I know we're not familiar in general with the computer science standards, but you can start to think about where you and your interests fit in and where the projects that you might pilot fit in. This is how that level of detail that I just showed you with the concepts and the sub-concepts then gets further broken down into standards and related to grade bands, right? So this is the point at which you're like, oh, I've ceased to be interested because you got overly specific and complicated, the topic, right? That's at least me. I'm like, you've segmented it too much. But this is what we do with education is try and figure out what exactly are we doing with these learning activities. So this is just part of the progression of standards, but it does link on the slides to the whole progression, which has been in our folders, since we began meetings. So this is what I'm asking. Sorry to be so slow in getting there. But is to say, what I need from you each is some sense of like a personal teaching map of how those core practices, concepts and sub-concepts, and the individual standards, just some of them. Don't worry about, making it 100% exhaustive, but there's a couple levels at which you could do this. Level A, I'll kind of hound you and make sure every person does this for me. Just in general, based on the subject and the grade level you teach, go through that one time and say, well, which of those core practices, concepts and sub-concepts and individual standards are the ones I want to, like, they align with my teaching goals, they make sense for me to integrate, or I'm actually already doing them even without, bending myself in a new way just to address the computer science concept, or computer science standard. So just in a sense, kind of figuring out which part of that do you feel is most relevant to and overlaps most with the way you would like to approach teaching your subject and your students in general, right? So that doesn't have to be in relation to the specific projects you're piloting. It's just like a kind of a sense of what out of all of this thinking about computer science integration, which part of it's meaningful to you and is achievable within the scope of your teaching? Then if you can, for one or more projects. Now, Lara has been very helpful in providing another example just now about the story map project that a very impressive number of students have done at her school. So that could be an example. Also, Renee's work with her students on the Nat Geo Mapmaker Interactive, which might be an iterative, something she's done multiple times on multiple topics. That could fit on a line where you say, well, here's the thing I did, the project, the activity, the routine that I've been using, and here's the specific core practices, concepts, and standards that it addresses. So do you get what I mean? One is just like a generic, this is territory I would claim as of interest to me in the computer science standards, and the second line, the deeper version is kind of relating it to a specific activity or a specific resource you're using and saying this thing, this lesson, this learning activity connects with these core practices, concepts, sub-concepts, and standards. And then if you really wanted to be a star, you would do it for another. You would do it for multiple activities. But it would be super awesome if everybody could do at least the first and the second with just one activity. Then I would have tons and tons of information to share, and it would really reflect the breadth of how all this conversation and information can translate into your teaching practice going forward. Does this make sense, and or do people have questions about this? What I'm asking you to supply me with is a document that might likely fit like in a table on one page using this format right here.
Makes sense.
Okay. I hope you know I am reluctant to ask you things to do that are accounting or um, organizing. Yes, Josh, this slide is my template that I threw together in the 2 minutes before I was like, I should have a template for them to share. So if you could just make a table on a Word document with those columns and like I said, you only my only requirement is going to be that first row, the general, like, hey, like Josh, the general might actually be harder for you than it is for everybody else, given that you're our computer science teacher. But um, uh, that's that would I will explain that when I share our combined results, by the way. But that first one, just in general, the things that have to do with the overlay that you see in general between the computer science standards and your teaching goals and the standards you're teaching towards in your class. Because other than Josh, everybody else is also and primarily teaching towards another set of standards, right? So this is our add-on. This is not that to which we're primarily accountable. This is the thing that we're integrating. So, Josh, if you have any questions about, I don't worry about making it too big a thing. You could actually kind of, if you wanted to, we could talk about kind of flipping the script and you talking about where geographic thinking or geospatial technologies fits for you. And that would actually be very helpful for me. So, so here I'm offering you a template, then in Josh's case, the freedom to kind of ignore the template and do something else that might make more sense given your situation. Is that okay? I know saying you don't have to use the template isn't always helpful because sometimes it's easier to just fill out the form. Okay, well, I will follow up with everybody by email just like I do, although it's been slow because of the holidays. But after this, actually, I think we've such great attendance tonight. But I will follow up with people and I'll remind you of what this request is. So, and at that point, it might even have a Word document attached to the email, so you wouldn't have to create your own template. So I'll do that. You can wait for that. But this would be very helpful. And that way, by the time I get together with all the other projects, I will be able to, in a much more condensed way, contribute to that conversation they want to have about what are we doing around the computer science standards. I imagine there's somebody in the conversation in this gathering that's going to happen that might be thinking of they should have spent all of this money on computer science education. And so I would like to be able to make the case that we're doing meaningful stuff in meeting the goals of that document laid out. And that's why I went over those kind of top level things, because I think it's particularly clear at that level that integration of computer science into other subjects is really essential to get to those goals of equity and kind of the core practices being integrated within the way people go about their lives and their work.
And starting them young with it too.
Yeah, exactly. You're just like, I mean, at some point there were people that are like, you really think kids need to learn to read and write? Like they could learn that later. We need them to learn how to like plow a straight row and plant the seeds at the right depth. And people are like, no, let's get on the technology, you know? And so this is for the 21st century, this is like the basic skill set to be communicative and interactive with other people and the environment around you. I accept that's true. Even though I'm a bit of a Luddite at heart and would like it not to be true, I accept it to be true. Okay, so we've got a little bit of time left. Last time we met, we talked just a bit. Like I said, there's only a smaller subset of us that are actually going to the conference, computers, California Council for the Social Studies. I see CS and I immediately say computer science now. But you guys are all teachers and understand uh, the 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 nexus of professional learning, wherein you try and create an experience that's worth the time that an educator invests in sitting in a session, right? That's the threshold you have to meet where the person walks away and says it was worth the time. And the session that we've had accepted is the one called Teaching with GIS, Centering, Place, and Accessing Data for Deeper Learning. The good thing is we wrote basically two sessions that would allow us to kind of cover similar territory. So in this case, the only thing that I think we have to commit to is really talking explicitly about GIS, which is probably a little bit easier for people to get their minds wrapped around than if we come in saying geocomputation, probably. So we lead with GIS and then we explain what geocomputation is and how GIS helps you get into doing it in a visual format. Unlike the STEAM symposium that required me to write all this text about the learning objectives and the organization, this is all we submitted to CCSS was this very short description. So basically all it means is that we're gonna give teachers ideas about how to activate GIS as a classroom resource, as a teaching instructional inquiry tool. And what, so other than the people who have volunteered to present, does anybody have a suggestion or an idea or thought about what might make a session on this topic most useful? I guess one question, just to make it a more answerable question, I'll specify part of my concern is, should we have people doing and clicking things? Should it be mostly like guided activities where they're using GIS? Or should it be mostly explaining with the time we have what the value of it is and how it can be used in instruction, and then thinking people will go and do the clicking later?
I
Honestly,
think if we can have them click, yeah.
I was gonna say a little bit of both. I mean,
Mhm.
a little introduction and an explanation of what it is and why it's important, but
Right.
then leading them into the activity. Because I feel like, I mean, speaking for myself, any conference I go to, the things I remember, the things I take away are when I have those tangible experiences. Um, Even it could be just a really engaging discussion, but if somebody's not giving me something to follow up with later, to come away with where I've practiced it, then it just doesn't stick.
And if we can even have them started a little for what's applicable to their classroom, if they've started a project too, then you go and you can keep it going in your class too.
Okay. So if you do something, it's better than just hearing something, because I kind of agree. It can be really interesting ideas and it gets lost. And okay, Michelle's agreeing interactive. Okay, so a combination, like a little talking, a little engagement. So one concern I have about really interactive sessions is sometimes you only have time to do a very little bit of something, because you run into the same thing Renee runs into with her fifth graders of like keeping everybody going. And some people are like, but what? Where was I supposed to be? How did you get there? Right? And um, so what about the idea of like having a little like a sample set of it, like introduce a resource, for example, like so Nicole's got lots of resources and we could easily set aside and let Nicole do the session on her resources. So we want them to get the full benefit of what Nicole has to offer and leave time for other things, right? So like what I'm thinking is if each one of the speakers kind of introduces a resource, gives a quick explanation of what it is, and then kind of figures out a way for people to do it like an interactive starter, right? So they get like a quarter of the way into the thing and then they see how it works and they can come back to it.
So something like a geo inquiry might be a good thing to start with, and not having to follow all the way through a geo inquiry, because those
Right.
are both whatever format you want to use it on, And those are really applicable to teachers at all grade levels. So, and they're interactive, but it's also a lesson, so they can walk away with a lesson plan right away.
Yeah,
A
okay.
good starting point, something like that.
I agree. And we can maybe we can make something like a hyper document, like a one-page document with a because I guess what I'm hoping is we can get like multiple resources into teachers' hands with enough information and interaction so that they can figure out which ones are most interesting. Because if we only get a couple, then maybe not everybody walks away feeling like they've got something they're interested in using.
That's actually, I was trying to type that and then I'm eating and all these things, but I was gonna say a hyper doc would be amazing. I always feel like when I would like at the NCGE conference, the ones that I feel like I got the most value for is when I leave with just this list of resources of things that I have access to now. So, and that's that kind of practical, but it's always good to try. I like the idea of having, a little bit of why we care about this, why is this important, right? Get them excited about it, show them a lesson, let them try it out so they can start to get the feel of it. But then they have this list of like, look, here you go,
Right. And
right?
even if we don't have time to demo all of that, it's like, oh, you got a taste of what some of these things are.
Yeah. But I think a hyper doc or a printout, something where they can go and hyper, I feel like hyper docs are best because then they can just click on it, but something that they can have where there's a list of resources for them to take
Right.
with.
And I think I know CCSS and most other conferences now are like a app-based program instead of a printed program. So then to have instead of just sharing the slides, having a one-page thing that they can go back to rather than having to hunt through slides to find the links, which is usually my style, is put loads of links in a slide set, but that's a little less inviting than a one page with some, like an annotated bullet points of this is a link and this is one or two phrases that helps you understand what it is. Okay, I like that idea, Josh, about I agree a presentation needs a hook. Um I think I like that. And that's I think my idea is to have a hook that makes the point about the value of centering place and accessing data, how that helps generate deeper learning. And I think that the hook can do that in a way that also has people interacting with the geospatial technology right from the outset, or at least looking at some live data and doing a live interpretation of it. Um, and even before we get into like an instructional context, just like a icebreaker, let's get you thinking about what GIS can do to put you in a spot for creative inquiry. Okay, cool. Well, thank you for that input. That's very helpful. And we can do that. We can do that in 50 minutes or whatever we get for our session. I believe it's 50. So we'll have some resources, we'll do some demo, and we'll explain the rationale so that people have a reason to not only listen to us while we're speaking, but then um, put our hyperdoc at the top of the stack of things they want to follow up with after they get home from the conference. Okay. All right. Look at that. I had a slide with our next meeting on it. We will be meeting on February 12th, and then I'll say we only have 3 more meetings to go. So I did not leave time, but now I have left 8 minutes. Don't forget about the form where you just drop your little description of what the learning activity is, where you say, hey, 400 students did the story map activity, and we gave them these parameters, and these were the challenges, but this was the payoff. Or students have been working with Nat Geo Mapmaker, and we've done it on a variety of topics, and students use their products this way. those kinds of things that will help us retain the learning from this grant project and help me and us collectively to tell the story about what it looks like and to make it a little less daunting for somebody to decide that they are gonna accept the reality that a mashup of computer science and geography, which they may or may not agree to call geocomputation, is very relevant and a very important thinking skill for and analysis skill for their students to be developing. So I look forward to seeing you guys in February, but I'll hang around if there's questions or conversation that you want to have.